Capricorn, Uranus around 10 degrees Pisces, Uranus about 10 degrees Taurus, Jupiter about 10 degrees Cancer. So they're all forming these incredible angles toward each other. We also have Saturn during an exact 60-degree sextile to Mars this Sunday. And Saturn then goes retrograde on July 26th. When Saturn goes retrograde, it tends to be fiercer, tends to create more suffering and problems. So you get your potential Saturn problems together before Saturn goes retrograde, because it goes retrograde until December, and it's usually a big, long period of suffering happening. We also have Jupiter opposition Pluto July 20th on Monday, and that's a kind of a big deal. We get that aspect every 12 or 13 years. The last time we had is 2013. We'll talk about what that means in a minute. Last time we had Jupiter in Australasia, we had the Ebola breakout. So again, we are worried about these kind of epidemics happening. There's some tick epidemic in Martha's Vineyard, and seems to be, there's a bunch of weird things happening. There are people that try to disrupt the planet with epidemics, and the truth about COVID's even coming out now. Looking at this summer, we have Sun in Cancer starting today until August 17th. Cancer is a friendly sign. The middle part of Cancer is ruled by Saturn. Still a little bit auspicious. Usually the Sun does okay in Cancer, but it is not good for Leo rising. It's a 12th house transit, bringing up expenditures and deep inward experience and things like that. You also have Uranus trining Pluto in a couple days. We'll talk about that in a minute. All these outer aspects are big. Jupiter opposing Pluto on July 20th. At the same time, Jupiter trines Neptune on July 20th. Saturn sextiles Mars the day before. Mars in Mrigashirsa, which is the constellation of Orion, happens on July 23rd. Mars going into its own nakshatra. Usually gets emboldened with more Martian energy, whether that's good for fighting, probably. Mrigashirsa is a very spiritual planet. They're ruled by Mars. It means a spiritual awakening. Pluto sextile Neptune on July 25th. That's between Capricorn and Pisces. And Saturn retrograde starting at 20 degrees on July 26th. It goes till December. It tends to be more powerful a week before it goes retrograde. Sun opposing Pluto. There's always kind of a big governmental tension, power play tension between government and people in government and other countries sometimes, and leadership and stuff like that, big power plays. That peaks into July 27th, the day after Saturn goes retrograde. Sun conjunct Jupiter is the positive of the month. It's exactly conjunct July 29th. When that happens, it's in Western astrologers call that cazimi. Cazimi means in the heart of God. So it can be a very spiritual moment if you're ruled by Jupiter. You may feel very spiritual, very uplifting. It can provide a moment of grace and all the other tensions that are going on. Full moon this month is, I think, on July 29th in Capricorn, on the Cancer-Capricorn axis, which is kind of crowded with Pluto and Capricorn and Jupiter in Cancer. Venus goes into Virgo on July 21st through pretty much Labor Day. It's very important in financial astrology because we get price deflation when Venus goes into Virgo. So for sure, it will spur selling in the stock market. Things that are overbought, like grains, are probably going to do to expand with the kind of drought in the West and in Europe. And, the reality is that, they always go down. Grains often go down in August just because there's some rain and the crop has been doing well. But overall, world crops are in trouble. Other key events, Hilo, Mercury conjunct Neptune, some very minor. Mars goes into Gemini on April 2nd. We talked about that going in the 7th house of enemies. Mercury in Cancer on August 5th. Mercury in Cancer tends to confuse Mercury. Mercury is an intellectual planet. It doesn't know how to deal with emotions, very uncomfortable in Cancer, and creates kind of analyzing emotions too much and getting confused. Sun trining Saturn is always kind of a boss co-worker tension cycle, or presidential congressional tension cycle, or father-son tension cycle. Trines are a little bit better than oppositions, but it's still kind of tense. Venus trines Pluto, August 10th. Venus, I usually find that aspect is kind of good for price inflation temporarily. Also, Venus opposition Neptune would also support that. So there's a recovery if we start going down with prices early August, and maybe there's a recovery into the 10th or something like that. Mercury opposing Pluto and trining Neptune on August 11th, sextiling Uranus on the 12th, and the combustion with Jupiter ends on August 13th. But Mercury goes combust August 13th to September 13th, which usually inflates prices. So potentially the Venus deflation will be stronger the first couple weeks of August, but then Mercury combustion will come to the rescue. Okay, so let's look at some of the these big aspects. Again, we don't to have all of them within a couple of weeks is just highly unusual. I mean, some people say the world will never be the same. Well, I mean, there are a lot of things happening in the world. I don't expect that we're going to get a nuclear bomb going off, or some horrific event. And a lot of these aspects are actually positive. Pluto trine Uranus trines she gives a lot of power to technology, communications, information saturation. Also, it tends to be a kind of creative aspect because Uranus is very creative. It may just even spark more kind of innovations in technology. And it's a long aspect, even though it's exact here, both those planets go retrograde, so that one repeats for a couple of years and may continue to support the technological revolution. Geopolitically, sometimes it causes problems with ideological struggles and reforms of power. We have a lot of this happening now, where some of the socialists and communist people are talking about, let's abolish the Senate and the president and just have a House of Representatives. And again, all these people are kind of naive about the history of and failed history of socialism and communism this century. It always sounds good, and it doesn't ever work. I think Rahu in Aquarius is kind of spurring it, and that goes on until November. But there may be some other influences that will continue to support it. Jupiter going into Leo for a couple months at the end of the year will have a throw an aspect on Aquarius also. Sometimes Pluto-Uranus favors rapid changes in information system. Well, I mean, that's every day in our life. I mean, years ago, we never thought we could carry our phones and collect our email, or, send out major documents, So there's so many new things happening in the next couple of years. And the big thing happening with Pluto is about overpowering people sometimes. If you follow the news, the UK is banning social media for people under 16, and they're doing it to, prevent teens from using pornography, but they really kind of want to be able to register everybody who's on the internet. So to take away, kind of people's freedoms. And, the UK has been notorious for this for a while. I mean, I have friends in the UK, and even during COVID, if you sent an email out, speaking out against COVID or the government, somebody actually would show up at his door, and somebody did show up at his door. So they're getting really kind of totalitarian with communications, and that's kind of Pluto-Uranus also on a dark level, and that's happening in other countries in the world. Germany's also kind of, in other countries, Australia already passed a ban like that. So it's a way of controlling people and keeping track of what they watch and then coming to their door if they don't like what you watch. It's really kind of ugly, very ugly, very, very ugly. We also have Pluto sextiling Neptune. That's a 60-degree aspect from Capricorn to Pisces. And astrologers usually talk about this again as restructuring collective imagination, technology, science, spirituality, and power systems. All those things are kind of happening with AI, with governmental fears about regulating AI, with government control over the media in different countries. Again, all these things are about larger mass institutional change we see happening, and again, these aspects are long. These planets go retrograde, so they stick around for a while. Um, Neptune is often linked to mass mood, oceans, contagion, dissolving boundaries. Again, the whole movement toward borderless countries is kind of Neptune trying to dissolve nationalism in favor of having one world family that ultimately somebody is going to run. It's not like their experiences that somebody wants to control everybody. So there are people that have these long-term goals to kind of be in charge of the world, and getting rid of national boundaries is the beginning. That's why we have the U.S. stopped it, and some people aren't happy with it.